What makes us unique? That's a great question. So MediaVoices has been going now for about 8 years. We started out as a podcast, but more recently we became a newsletter business as much as a podcast business. We also do events. So 4 or 5 years ago, probably 5 years ago now, we started the Publisher Podcast Awards. That then became the Publisher Podcast Awards and the Publisher Newsletter Awards. And basically, why we did that was to kind of recognise the work that publishers specifically were doing in the podcast and the newsletter field. And then that spun out into some conferences. So again, we started with the podcast conference, and then we had the newsletter conference. And this year, we've got 4 separate tracks. We've got Publisher Podcast Summit, Publisher Newsletter Summit, but we've also got a print summit and an app summit. It's really about sharing the expertise that the people in the room have, not that we have. The whole point about the podcast was always, it's never, pointing out people's mistakes or doing that kind of gotcha journalism. It was always about learning from people. And we've taken that same thing straight across into the events. One of the reasons that we do the awards is because it's a great way to learn what people are doing. I think that's the perfect word, compliment, because just doing something because you've always done it or because everyone else is doing it, that's not right. You've got to be intentional about it. It's got to be about what the audience wants. So if your audience wants print, then do print. If your audience wants apps, do apps. If they want both, do both. I think personalisation is a weird one. Personalisation right down to the individual level is quite difficult because it's about technology, right? So you need an investment in the technology, AI, or even just proper full-on CRM systems. Personalising in the sense of targeting a niche, a very specific market. It was really interesting listening to Tracy talking about The Grocer, 160-year-old magazine. But on what she said was, if you target that community and you're very focused on that community, you can innovate with all sorts of stuff as long as you keep the mission in mind. So personalisation at an individual level, huge potential, but needs investment. Personalisation within a community, I think is easier to do and maybe more valuable. You're talking to the wrong person for that, because I was a journalist. I am a journalist now, but I was an editor. Massive, huge, because it's the thing that differentiates a publishing company or a media organisation. We talk so much about AI, and AI can do amazing things, and it can make people really productive. But AI is not human. It can only copy what's been done before. And creative people, whether that's writers, whether it's designers, whether it's podcasters, whoever it is, the human element of that goes into the content, and that's where the evidence is, if you like, of that humanity. And I think if people want to differentiate themselves, that's where it's going to be really important. Might be different in an information business. Might be different if you're supplying pricing information. I did a report a couple of years ago about practical AI, and that was all about taking all these huge data sets and filtering it to give people accessible information on weather or housing information or children's sports leagues, which just, to have a human being doing that, A, would be really boring, but B, would be really expensive. But when it's creative content, I think that's a differentiator. Curiosity, I think that's a huge one. To try and keep up with any of this, you have to be curious about what's going on. Whether that's curious about business models, curious about organizational models, product development. It's about it's about staying interested in what's going on. So I think that's one. I think the other one is people skills, because AI can't do that. If you can talk to people, if you can get people to tell you what they know, then that's a huge thing. And I think the last one maybe is just bloody mindedness, just sticking with it. You know, stories don't always come, whether it's podcast guests, whether it's a story for an article or for a newsletter or whatever, they don't always come easy. So sometimes you just have to keep plugging away. So that kind of bloody mindedness, I think, is still important. Well, it's brand new. It only happened a couple of weeks ago. I've known Colin for a long, long time. I've probably known him for more than 10 years, probably 15 years. He's a very, very smart man. And one of the things that I've always believed is if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to be in a different room. And one of the things we're working with Colin is we've got this, we've got all his experience, all his contacts, all his breadth of knowledge that's going on, and that comes into what we're doing with the podcast. I think what Colin gets from that is we have a different focus. Colin's focus is on senior people, money, numbers, all that top line stuff. Our focus tends to be on the product side. So I think coming together, there's a really interesting Venn diagram there. We'll continue to serve the product people and he'll continue to serve the senior management people. But there's a really interesting middle part to that I think we'll be able to grow on top of that. Also, he's got a great subscriptions business. We have a good sponsorship business. He doesn't have any sponsorship, we don't have any subscriptions, so I think we can bring that together. I think the other thing from Colin is he's worked on his own for so long, doing Flashes and Flames, and now he's got people to talk to, which is, that's a great thing, right? It's a good way to go.